Oogity boogity. Yes, I'm here on a Tuesday, not a Thursday or a Sunday. So, yeah, go figure. I'm just kind of, doing it. So, I decided to add the Tuesdays because, multiple reasons, but chief among them is the fact that it's better for Twitch to have at least 3 days a week. But, oh well. So, as you may have noticed, that today I don't have down here listed a character type or whatever. Instead, I said Trollish Fortitude. That's because today we're actually going to be sculpting a troll. Go figure. Now that troll it's gonna be kind of not quite the standard D&D type, and not quite it's gonna be kind of unique, but it's still gonna be recognizably trollish. It's gonna be pretty far away from the Lord of the Rings movie trolls. Yeah. So, what we need to do is we need to get started in DAZ Studio. And the next thing we do is we get this silly cat off my lap who just hopped up there. Now, what we're going to do, some of you know this already, some of you don't, but one of the things I have done with this basic male figure I've created is I've also created multiple races. One of those races just happens to be troll. This is the basics on how I see a classic troll. It's heavily influenced by both Dungeons & Dragons and Warhammer Fantasy. Another modifier that we're going to do to it is we're going to make it a little bit thinner, longer limbed, but still, do we want that muscular? Yeah, that looks nice and viciously trollish. Now, what we're going to do next, actually no, let's drop that muscular down, because we want this kind of the, yeah, there we go, that's good enough. So what's going to be important here is the pose and the detailing. Now, your typical troll in D&D doesn't actually wield a weapon, so we're not going to worry about props. We are going to really get into the texture of his skin when it comes time to sculpt, though. We're also going to detail the ears, because as you can see, since they're based on the human ears, they're rather plain, rather low detailed. He also does not have fangs. We're going to add in the standard tusks for the orc. That's about as far as we're going to start. So we're going to first start by orcifying him. Then we're going in and loading the orc tusks. And then we're going to parent them to his lower jaw. Then we're going to unorcify him, and we're going to trollify him. Now you'll notice that the tusks are sitting outside. So what we're going to do, we're going to Z-translate them back, and we're going to have to X-scale them a little bit, because they're a little bit too big. Actually, no, let's go ahead and just do a regular scale. Okay, and then we're going to Z-translate them too far, and translate them back just a little bit more. No, they're still too... they don't work. We'll make some new ones. Okay. So right now he's 100% trollified. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to export him. And when I do, I'm going to then load him into 3D Studio Max, which coincidentally I also have prepared for export. And then we go into props, other, base, trollish. And again, you can't see the dialogues. Let me make sure I've got the, okay, it's at 0. Now the next problem video to load. I didn't have it prepared because it didn't click, you know what I mean? So once it loads, we'll be able to go ahead and throw it open in excuse me, in here. Yeah, I'm kind of tired. I felt that it would be easier. Hold on just a second. Sorry about that. On the plus side, that little distraction there gave me a chance to throw open 3D Studio Max. So what we're going to do is import, and I gotta go to my broadcast miniatures. Oh wait, no, it's not in the broadcast, it's in props, other, base trollish, import. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and freeze the troll. Wait, unfreeze, because we need to also change the base color to be something that's not quite so garish and a little bit easier to look past. Okay, now freeze selected. Okay, we can still easily see the shape of the mesh, the silhouettes in the top, side, and front views. But what we're going to do is we're going to do something similar to how we made the orky tusks. We're going to make spheres first. And then we're going to lift them up to where they would be in the jaw. And then we're going to zoom in and make sure that it's looking good. Now we're going to drop it down from 32 segments to 12. The editable poly. Then we're going to select these vertexes up here and just kind of drag them up a little bit. Up a little bit more. And then up a little bit more. There, it's a little bit too big around, so now we're going to shrink the diameter a little. And now we're going to give it a mesh smooth. Collapse all. Let's make them a little bit taller, a little bit nastier. And now we're going to mirror them. But first we got to move the pivot point to an X of 0. You may have seen that arrow right here jump over to the side. Well, now we hit this button up here, it creates a mirror image, but we want to copy, not just mirror the existing one. Excuse me. Finally, we have to reset transform. Now you notice that the one in the rendered video, rendered screen suddenly turned black. That's because when 3D Studio mirrors something, it scales it negative 100%. Now we hit normal, and it reversed the normals, collapse all. Now we're going to hide the frozen objects. That's our tusks. We're going to click the one and attach this one. File, export, export selected. Wait, no. I know what we can do. Let's unhide those, and we're going to rotate them forward a bit. Just a bit. Okay, file, export selected, and then we're going to our same directory as before. Make sure we're saving as an object file and calling it simply troll tusks. Export. Done. And that's our tusks. We go ahead and head back to DAZ Studio. We're going to File, Import, and then make sure I'm going to the same spot. Other troll tusks. Accept. Now the troll tusks came in invisible. I'm still going to go ahead and parent them to the jaw. So we got to go to Surfaces. Change the base color to white, the ambient color to black, and the opacity strength to 100%. That was a problem. There. And now we have our tusks on our troll. Now, we're going to go ahead and just play with that jaw just a little bit. Yeah. And a little bit of... And that's what we get. Okay. We're also going to play with the brows. And we're going to symmetrify them. Symmetry. Left to right. Now that's something else we're going to tweak when we get into ZBrush. Actually, let's go ahead and make the right one slightly different. We're not going to have it as drastically over, or as drastically turned, or as drastically up. He's kind of got like one eye. Actually, yeah, let's go ahead and bring him back over. And there. We're going to exaggerate the thickness of that brow once we get it to ZBrush. Now, we have our buddy here. We need to give him a pose. And hello, Crazy J64. Sorry, it takes me a couple minutes to respond to people who post in the chat because I don't have the chat on a separate monitor because I have one monitor. Excuse me. Now, another good let's start with deciding what kind of pose we want. How about intimidating and about to swat? Yeah, something like grrr. So the first thing we need to do, we grab the hip. I've said this before, and I'm going to say it almost every time I do a pose. You always want to have your hips and your shoulders not parallel to the ground and not parallel to each other on any plane. Because what will happen is, actually that's backwards, yeah. What will happen is it will look stiff. It'll look unnatural. And you'll lose any sense of dynamism you might have. So right now, as you can see by the placement of it, he's not parallel. So now we got to move the chest and abdomen. And what we're going to do first is we're going to twist him a little. Then I'm actually going to do the abdomen separate from the chest. We're going to bend it back a little. To the side. Chest is going to go forward a bit and even more to the side. A little bit more twist. Okay, so the torso is ready. Actually, let's give that abdomen a bit more of a bend. Now the neck is going to bend forward a bit and twist a little. While the head is going to twist like that, but we're going to bring it side to side. Okay, now the legs are still a bit off. This one we're going to, well, one thing we need to remember is we need to make sure that the feet are underneath, the center of gravity is directly over the feet. So, I'm going to bend this foot a little. Bend this back just a bit more. And we're going to hit Control D to drop him to the ground. And we need to bend the toes a bit just to get them out of the way. When we look over, we'll see that this foot is on the ground, but the toes are a little floppy. Bing, 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 bing. And the foot isn't quite flat to the ground. Okay, if we go from the front, we also see that we need to turn it kind of side to side. And now we have this foot to deal with. We can see, you might not be able to see the very thin gray line right here. That's the ground plane. We need to get that foot back onto the ground plane. So, okay. And then okay, and we're going to bend toes up just a little. And yeah, his feet are under his center of gravity, although almost on the toes. Next is the shoulders. This will be going kind of to the back a little. We're going to twist this shoulder so that we have that nice deformation of the pectoral muscle there. We're then going to unbend this side of the arm, bring it forward a little. and twist it. Then we're going to bend the arm and twist it so that the hand is forming, is almost ready to, like he's going to slap somebody. The rest will be fist. We're going to bend the wrist. And then we're going to select both segments of the fingers, because you'll notice that the fingers are, despite being 4 individual fingers, are actually one piece, so to speak, and they bend together. So we're gonna close it in just a little bit more. Actually, we're gonna close in the ends of the fingers a little bit more. Okay. Now we're gonna bring the thumb forward a little bit and bend it like that so it's completing a fist. Now this arm we're going to also drop. We're going to leave it where it is as with respect to front to back, side to side. We're also going to twist it a little bit more like this and bend the arm. And then twist it. Now the fingers we're going to bend together slightly. On a regular size miniature, I'd say that would be a difficult hand pose to print. But yeah, it's a bit more exaggerated. You want these exaggerated dynamic poses where you can. Now the neck, we're going to go side to side with it and untwist the head. I'm going to bend it a bit. And there we go. Okay, there we have our basic troll pose. I'm not sure I like the fact that he's a little bit forward, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the feet. I'm going to pin their translations. That means is, as long as I don't put too much effort into things, they're not going to suddenly go spiraling out of control. Now I'm going to just grab his hip and move it backwards a bit. It's a bit too far back. Bring it forward just a little. And now I'm going to unpin all. And I'm going to have to retwist the feet. Or rebend the feet. We go to a front view. And we'll see that his foot is not in the right position. So we're going to bend it forward again. Move it too much. Let's do a little bit of nudging. Okay, that's good. This one, it's good on the XY. Oh, no, it's not. Whoa. That was what happens when I accidentally click on the slot on the slider instead of on the little plus sign next to the slider. Now we go back, we zoom out, and we have our troll in a Bashy pose, and he's kind of rearing back a good bit to have that full line of motion from the foot up through the body to the arm. In fact, let's go ahead, let's raise the arm a little bit more, because we want that line of motion to really be dynamic. Yeah, there we go. This is a troll about ready to give something the serious, most serious thrashing of its life. So what we're going to do now, we're going to hide the tusks. We're going to export into my broadcast miniatures directory. Yeah, we're going to call this troll body. Accept. We're going to make the tusks visible and hide the body. And we're going to export this as troll tusks. Now that was just the base geometry and the basic pose. We're going to be tweaking a good bit of this in Zbrush, including these toes. They're made like they are, so that the human figures will have, you know, boots without me having to smooth over toes every single time. So with this guy, I'm going to have to do the opposite. I'm going to have to carve in toes when I sculpt on him. So what we're going to do now is we're going to swap programs once again, this time to Zbrush. Yes, I have all of these programs already up and running before I start the broadcast, so that I can just click a button in XSplit and bing, there they are. So what programs do you use, Crazy J? I'm going to import the body as the primary geometry. And I'm going to append a subtool, and this is going to be where I'm going to put the tusks. They're going to stay there until almost the end. Now the first thing I've got to do, first things first, I take the stroke, I click that button, lazy mouse, turn off lazy mouse. Lazy mouse is good for a lot of things, but not for what I'm about to do. I then have him selected, I go to geometry, and I subdivide him several times. And delete lower. Then I go to Dynamesh. And what Dynamesh does is it effectively takes all of this geometry and it gives it a sort of, oh wait a minute, I know something I forgot to do. While I'm down here at the base geometry, it's a lot easier to do some of the smoothing things I have to do. I'm going to switch from here to move topological. This way it'll only move when I'm wanting it to move, and I turn on brush, auto masking, back face mask, because I don't want the backside to move. I'm going to shrink this just a bit, and with a lowered intensity, start smoothing out this area here. Because what's going to happen is this wrinkle really needs to get undone. I'm going to deal with it fully later. I'm also going to go ahead and move this out. Oh yeah, I need to turn off backface masking for this. move his... Okay. Now... Excuse me! I go back to standard. I lower that quite a bit. And I'm going to go ahead and just kind of pull this up and out a bit before we get to next step. Okay, now let's go back up to 4 subdivisions and delete lower. What Dynamesh does, if I look at this geometry, you can see that there's a lot higher density geometry around the eyes than there is on the arm, for example. By the way, excuse me. All of those colors are the different groups that are available. And we turn that off. Now Dynamesh fuses everything into one solid mesh. And also makes that solid mesh out of quads as close to the same size as each other as it can. So I hit Dynamesh. Now if we look at the eye, for example, you'll see that there's a blend there. There's also a blend where the head is meeting down there and a blend down here. And now is time to break out the Wacom. Yeah, it's a Wacom Tablet. This is what I do 90% of my sculpting with. You see, some things that you do with the mouse only when you need to have 100% on all the time with every stroke. The reason for this is that's what the mouse does. Everything is on 100% of the time. With the tablet, it's on based on how strongly you're pressing, so you can have a nice little stroke. For example, let's go ahead and blend here. But what we're going to do is we're then going to go back in with what's called slash brush, turn off its lazy mouse, shrink it down a whole buttload, and kind of carve in a line for where that meets that. We also need to kind of do it here too, but we don't need to do the smoothing because we didn't have an issue with the pectoral like we did with the other. Now the next thing that we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and fix this face. First things first, we're going to smooth out the brow area right here. We're going to give a brief smoothing to the brow here, but we're going to come back to it in a second for something else, and that something else is inflation. And I don't mean Reaganomics. What we're going to do is we're going to inflate the brow, give it thickness. This is also how we're going to be ending up adding details to the face with this, the slash brush, and the standard brush. Smooth that just a little. Yeah, there we go. Now we're going to make the mouse a bit bigger and inflate the nostrils just a tad, because we want this to actually have visible nostrils. Now you might be able to hear my printer in the background. What I'm actually doing with that is I stumbled across an old model I did a while back, and I've redone it, and I'm printing it. It's a nice giant robot. And then we're gonna smooth that. He's got nostrils. They may not show on some printers, but he's got nostrils. Now, right now, the only anatomy we really need to worry about is this shoulder joint here. The rest of it is reasonable enough, and we're going to deal with more of the texture and detailing on the skin, and then we're going to get into dealing with this ear. One of the first things we need to do is we need to smooth out this whole area. You see, the problem is the bicep attaches under the pectoral and under the deltoid. So we got to make sure that this is one piece. We're going to further detail it later. And then we've got to kind of bring up this area. Kind of blend it in a little for the side muscles down here. And kind of smooth as much as we can. Zoom out. And we can tell this is not looking that great right here. So we're going to go back to slash. I'm going to very lightly cut underneath and here, and then we're going to smooth it a little. Then we need to get to inflate, drop it down a good bit, make the mouse a good bit bigger, and we're going to just very carefully build up that bicep. Same way we're going to build it this one. If you change the size of a muscle, it's usually a good idea to change the size of its counterpart on the opposite side. And this is the triceps we're working on right now. It may be a monstrous beast that regenerates in a manner that we can't even comprehend, but it still has basic humanoid anatomy. And it's always a good idea to keep your basic anatomy proper, because it'll make even the most unrealistic of critters seem more realistic if it's got an anatomy, if it's got bits and bobs we can recognize that aren't genitalia. And by that I mean things like the proper shape for the muscles, and bony landmarks and things like that. Now, speaking of anatomy, there's something that we are going to have to do to him. And that's, we're going to have to give him something to cover his bits and bobs. Because, you know, we don't want troll danglies hanging out all over the place. Nor do we want to stare at troll crack. I'll probably post a picture of it up in the showcase side of the Discord. What I'm printing is basically, it's a giant robot. I'd made a version a while earlier that was a bit too small, in my opinion. It was intended for a 10mm print, but it's basically, it's an update of this. I know that's too small to see, but yeah, it's like a little tri-laser cannon on one arm and a rocket launcher arm on the other. It's also not in that super static pose, it's actually walking. And back to work on the troll. Okay, now the way we get this is, first things first, we have to make the belt for his loincloth thingy. So what we're going to do, we're going to shrink the mouse. I hit Control and I bring the focal shift all the way over, because what we're going to do is we're going to draw on where the belt would be. That's too wide. We want the belly to be kind of hanging out, so we're going below the edge of the belly and coming back up over the hip, and then behind that and connect back here. Now, the reason why I made that mask is in Zbrush, when you do that, you can go down to Extract. You click Extract and Accept, and you now have a subtool that extracted out what you had just masked as a new layer. I'm going to go ahead and I also kind of go up here, because see, the problem is it's still there. If I wanted to do anything else, I couldn't. So I come back to here. And now, you remember how I told you about how Dynamesh works? Well, let me give you a better example. Let's go ahead and move over down here. When I hit this, you can see that while there's nice square bits and bobs on the side, on the yellow surfaces here, it's just extremely long, thin, single polygons. That's not a good thing, because it won't let us do any kind of sculpting. Not really well, at least. So we go to Geometry, and we're going to Dynamesh it at 128. The reason we're doing it at 128 is because we want this to be like a rope. We then go to Deformation. We're going to polish it slightly. And there we go. Now we have basically a rope. We need to add in our front and back Ghibli covers. So what we're going to do is we're going to go up to here. We're going to append a cube. Oh, that's huge, isn't it? So what we're going to do now is we're going to go to Deformation, and first things first, size it down. Then we got to rotate it on the y-axis. So it's about right. No, before we do that, we got to offset it. Or not offset, we got to size it only on the Z. Make it negative 100, negative 50, negative 50. Yeah. Then we rotate it on the Y until it's right about the right size, and now we have to scale it on the X and Z. There. Okay, now it's time we just, let's scale it down on the Y also, because it's a little too tall. So E. Now we offset it on the Y to bring it down to about the, yeah, we forgot to turn off the X. That's how it was moving diagonally. On the Y to bring it down to about there, and then on the Z, bring it forward we're going to go ahead and use Move Topological. We're going to make that brush huge. And the focal shift huge. We're just going to grab it and move it into place. Then we're going back up here to Subtool and we're going to duplicate. This one, we're going to grab and move to the back. That's going to be our butt cover. Now we can shrink it down and reduce the focal shift back to 0. We can just start dragging bits and pieces of this into place. You'll notice I'm using the mouse and not the pen for this. That's because the pen is not quite sensitive, or rather I should say it's too sensitive. It would detect too many changes in what I'm trying to do. So we just stick this under. Now I'm going to enlarge it again. Pull the whole thing kind of back from here. Then here, what I got to do, shrink it back down, grab it here. Oh, I got to grab this, grab it here and make it go to the back, back. Okay, and another thing we're going to do is we're going to grab the bottom of the corners and pull them forward. Try and help with the dynamics of he's reaching in that direction. Let's go back to here and we're going to pull it to the side. Now we're going to shrink the brush and kind of pull this in that way and this kind of back. The reason is that will kind of combine it into. All right. Now we're going to take this and we're going to merge down so that it becomes one. Now, geometry, we're going to subdivide it once, delete lower, and then dynamesh it at 256. Now we go to inflate once more. Now this will be back into using the stylus, the tablet, because we want to kind of bring it out to fit there. Okay, frame out. Yeah. Actually, no, we need to have these dragging the other way, so move topological. Fortunately, this will help us get some chaos in the flow of the loincloth. Okay, yeah, that's better. That's more dynamic. That flows better. Okay. Just a second here. A little bit of soda. And here, a little bit of soda. Yeah, and I
here a little bit so.
and I apparently did mean a little bit. And I also apologize for accidentally getting some echo in there. Okay. Now, that is for just for now. We're going to go back up to the rope. We're going to back into geometry. We're going to divide it a couple times and turn up down our mesh. I'm going to zoom in. And what we're going to do, we're going to inflate it about here. Because this is where our knot is going to be. Now our knot will end up being kind of unrealistic in actual, it wouldn't actually work as a knot, but it'll look like a knot. We're going to divide it one more time. And now we're going into slash. We're going to use this to draw out the areas where our knot is. Side note, hiccups while sculpting, not a good thing. Okay. And then one more line here. Right now it looks kind of obscene, but that'll be fixed in just a moment. We're going to inflate it here. Then we're going to use move topological again. We're going to grab this end and we're going to drag it that way. We're going to drag this that way. We're going to inflate the ends, because this will be the ends of the rope. Oh. And so what we're going to do now, since it's already at 90,000, we're going to divide it beyond realism. When it's got as many polygons as the rest of the body, that's a bad thing. And we're going to take it to a 256 Dynamesh. Then we're going to divide it again, and what this did is this gave us a bit more even distribution of polygons. We go back to slash, and we're going to go ahead and redo all of these digs. Then we're going to go ahead and use the polish brush to kind of flatten out the ends. Oh, wrong way. I need to polish sub. And what this is for is we're going to be turning this into rough rope. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the rake tool, which is not something used for leaves, and we're going to go to Z sub. We're going to drag across. And then smooth it just a little. And we're going to shrink and go back to slash. And then we're going to just dig across a couple times. Alright, we need to increase that intensity. Now we use inflate to very carefully bring these back out. And then smooth. No, it didn't work. We're going to use standard brush. See, standard brings the whole thing out, whereas inflate just causes it to inflate where it is. I'll cut that out. It happens sometimes. The driver I've got is not exactly in the best of condition. There. And there. Now I'm going to use move topological, shrink it a bit, and kind of drag them out. FDM might not show this very well. Resin probably will. I do print FDM myself, so it's not like I'm deliberately designing for resin printers, but I do keep an eye on things like that detail. Okay, now we're going back to slash, and what we're going to do is we're going to make this bigger. And we're going to draw on the rope detailing. Okay, so now it's just basically draw on diagonal lines across this belt. And it'll look like a rope when we're done. At least from the point of view of miniature painting and sculpting. There we go. Now we frame it. Yeah, there we go. That is our rope belt. Now the next thing we got to do is we really don't need to do too much to the loincloths, but I do want to go ahead and give them at least a bit more cloth look to them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the slash brush. I'm going to make it bigger and a little bit weaker. I'm going to draw in some basic wrinkles. They don't need to be huge. Then I'm going to make it a little bit bigger and draw on the bottom of these wrinkles. The reason for drawing on the bottom of the wrinkles is because that's how wrinkles form. The cloth doesn't bend smoothly, it bends at an angle. There we go. That's good enough. So his clothing is pretty much done now. So the only thing we have left to do, well, first let's go ahead and merge his clothing. So we're going to merge down, frame, and we're going to dynamesh it, but first we're going to subdivide it. Now we're going to dynamesh it at 384. The reason for this is, oh, no, that's not good enough. Let's make it 512. Still not good enough. Let's make it 768. Okay. That's because we want it to be a single fused item. We're going to fuse it with the troll and his base later. But the troll's what we need to really focus on, because right now, yeah, he'd work as a decent little figure. Pose is great, but he's lacking something. He's not very detailed. His feet are just flappy, flat shoes. So, with the slash and the sub, we're going to shrink the mouse a little, increase the intensity a little, and draw on where his toes would be. Going to have a big toe. Oh. Let's do it this way. He's going to have a big toe. He's going to have three other toes, let's say. Index toe, and then a ring, and a pinky toe. And this needs to come further back. Okay, we're going to actually shape them here in a little bit. And then we need to do the same thing over here to this foot. We've got, first of all, let's straighten him out, turn him a little, and that way we can be a bit more manipulative of the toes. So we got first the big toe with a bit of a undercut here. Whoop. Then the mid toe with some, and then the pinky toe and the ring toe. And then we kind of draw that in. And we need to fix this little area right here. There. Now we frame out. And what we're going to need to do really is give him kind of crusty toenails. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to give him, use the inflate brush. We already got it selected. We're going to shrink it down. And we're going to give him crusty little toenail bed edges. That's too small. And let's increase the intensity. we also need to give him toe knuckles. And then shrink the and make toe tendons. Once again, as long as it has the right anatomy, it will look a lot better. Now we're going to use the layer brush. And once again, turn off lazy mouse. We're going to use that to build up his toenails. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then we're gonna shrink the brush and kind of smooth them into the bed. And then we're going to use slash to kind of go in under the bed and under the toenail. Actually, looking at it, I could probably get a better effect just by using the slash brush to outline the toenails. So we're gonna go in and then kind of smooth out underneath and go under. Yeah, that's what I need to do. Alright, so we go around this way, under, and around, under, and there he's got his nasty little toenailsies. Frame. And I need to do the same thing to the other foot. That's the kind of thing that we're doing. We're now adding the details that make it pop, that bring it to life. And this can often take quite a long time. But, you know, while we're doing this, we want to make sure that we're doing it right. That base geometry that I made for this, that was actually the hardest part of making miniatures, is making a basic shape for the critters that you make. And then smoothing it out because they do tend to vanish. And now slash time. And those last two didn't quite come out right because I gotta get a little bit further that way with them. No. Now frame. We're going to go from the feet up on this guy. And a lot of it's going to be done with the inflate brush. The next thing we're going to do is ankles. The inner ankle bone is ever so slightly higher up than the outer ankle bone. It's also more sharply coming out of the body at the bottom than at the top on both of them. So Okay, that's the ankles. Now the knees, in general, we want to make them a little bit knobblier. Because, you know, trolls got bones that are really super thick. So by making these knees a bit knobblier and thicker, it kind of helps emphasize that. Now I made that way too big, so I'm going to zoom it in a little bit. It's not bent like this one, so it doesn't have quite the same oomph. Now I'm going to shrink down and draw on the knee bone. There's a little flattening on top. The knee bone isn't really round, it's more triangular. So we're going to inflate the edges of it over here a little bit more. And down in the center is going to follow the shin bone. At least on this side. Yeah. I'm going to smooth a little bit on top. And the shin bone is mostly smooth in on one side, on the outside of the shin bone, a little bit tighter on the inside. So we're going to go back to our slash brush and very lightly kind of draw that little deviation and then give it a smooth to make it more of a suggestion of form rather than a sharp edge. And now our lower legs look pretty good. We need to go ahead and I'm going to hide that while I'm working. We're going to use the inflate brush again, but this time I'm holding down Alt to uninflate to get that little hollow behind the knee. It's also going to give us two tendons. The sides here can replicate those tendons. And then just a little bit more calf muscle. There's what appears to be two major calf muscles. And again, the one on the inside is a little bit higher up than the one on the outside. And by just enlarging from, yes, embiggening. It's a perfectly cromulent word. We're going to kind of give it a little bit more definition, a little bit more oomph to these calves. Now we've got the thighs. And make it a little bit bigger because there's really some pretty nice sized muscles in the thighs. And most of them will be hidden by the loincloth, but we want them there anyway because they help define the shape of the masses that we're working with. Okay. Now this is going to come down and down here. I'm going to smooth it. And then beyond this, there's really nothing else to do with the thighs. But as you can see, those thighs already look a lot better, a lot more detailed. Even if a lot of the parts are concealed by the loincloth. Now, the next thing we got to do is belly button, which is just a simple, really small deflate. And then, now that we've done that, we're going to inflate one area. Oh, no. Need to make this a little bit bigger. And we're going to get a bit rounder. And then we're going to... Oh, I remember. Shrink this. And we're going to use the add, a standard brush. And then we're going to hit inflate. Make the brush a good bit larger because we're going to be inflating the tip of the belly. And there we go. We got our belly button. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to start with slash. We're going to carve in a couple muscles that aren't normally seen outside of comic books, but make a really good detail in this figure. These muscles effectively help with the expansion and shrinking of the rib cage on inhalation with the diaphragm. They're really only going to be hinted at here. Okay. Next up, we'll deal with the back. One thing we need to do, we need to make... Oh, wrong one. Yeah, too much. We need to make muscles coming down from the back to the small of the back because, yeah, they got to be there. They may not be, you know, as massive as on a human bodybuilder in proportion, but they're there. We also need to shrink down, and let's do some further work on this part of the shoulder. Let's get it all just basically smoothed out and then smooth over. I'm smoothing over a troll's back shoulder that I smoothed over before. Yeah. Now the next thing we're going to do, we're going back to slash, and I'm going to add in the edges of the deltoid. The reason for this is the deltoid is what's holding his entire arm up. So we want to have at least some kind of detail delineating them. So, deltoid here needs a little bit of definition, but not a lot because it's not undergoing as much mass. It's not holding up the whole arm. It's kind of just there, kind of relaxed. That's pretty good. Alright, a little bit more soda from bottle number 2. Alright, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to move up the arms to the elbows. Now, the thing about the elbows is that they're not just pointy, they're wrinkly. We're going to shrink the mouse a bit, and we're going to draw on just a little bit, a couple of wrinkles. I'll lightly trace over ends of them. And then we're going to smooth a little bit. And then we're going to use Alt to pull them out and then smooth them again. Then we're going to use Standard, since it doesn't really do as much destruction to the detailing, and pull out the elbow. A little bit this way too. Actually, we also need to kind of give some heft to this forearm muscle. Okay. Once we've done the basic in shaping on him, we're going to give him a little bit of detail, some bits and bobs across the back, like maybe a mushroom or something, I don't know. Now we go back to slash, we shrink it back down, we do the same thing over here. Nope. No, cat, you can't be down there when I'm doing with the sculpting. And I gotta undo that one since it only got partially done before the cat decided to come up and say hi to Daddy. And then I smooth them. I enlarge it, and I kind of give it a bit of a deeper bit in places. And smooth it. And I hold Alt and draw on the center wrinkles. Yeah, wrinkles you want to be kind of semi-random because they are in real life, even on skin. And then we go back to Standard and pull out our elbows. Okay. I need to smooth that part right here. That's too much. And that's a little much. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is knuckles. The hands. And I don't mean the echidna. Let's hold on just a second. Just 1 second. Mishap with the kitty. Sorry about that. Not this one and not the one that was just in here. Yeah, see, the kitties love me. Yeah. Anyway. And hey, Narthor, you caught me while I'm working on a troll. Alright, let me go ahead and shrink the mouse to be, or the cursor to be about the size of the hand, of the fingers rather. And what I do first, I use inflate for this. I inflate the knuckles on the backs of the hand and then the fingers. Now the thing is, I've said this before, but I'm going to say it again. The size and knuckle placement on the index finger and ring finger are nearly identical. Some people will have slightly larger index fingers, some people will have slightly larger ring fingers. And on the pinky, it's smaller. Then I draw the tendons. Whoop. Yeah. That didn't look good after the second. So draw that. Oh. Draw that. Draw that. And then I smooth the ends as they vanish into the wrist. Now I smooth the spaces between the knuckles, because what that helps do, that helps straighten out the joints of the fingers. and it makes these knobs a little bit less knobbly, although with the troll we can get away with pretty knobbly knuckles. And we're going to kind of smooth that. Then we're going to enlarge the brush and do the knuckles on the thumb. We're also going to go ahead and make the wrist bones. Now, normally this would be about as far as I go, but considering how big these hands are, I need to go ahead and add on the bits and bobs for the underside of the palm. I also need to go ahead and shrink it and draw on, oh, that's too big, too small. Draw on the tendons on the inside of the wrist. Again, not everyone has them, but it's something that's so commonly seen that a lot of people think you have to. Now I'm going to switch to slash. The first thing that's going to happen is I'm going to slash. Oh, let's make it a little bit bigger. A little bit stronger, I should say. I'm going to slash the space between the fingers. And again, because this is the underside of a hand, it's something I'm going to have to deal with that I normally wouldn't. I'm basically drawing the bend spots in the hand, in the fingers. And again, just a little bit of smoothing. And here, smooth that out. And thus we have, the next thing we got to do, that's right, we've got to, we want to try to err on the side of making, oh come on, the middle finger bigger. So, digging the grooves between the fingers. Err on the side of making the middle finger wider and the pinky finger smaller. Okay, now frame the whole thing. And that hand looks a lot better than our fist, because our fist hasn't been done yet. Yeah, it's a lot of the details. I'm taking basic bony landmarks. I mean, you can see these landmarks and exaggerating them. You want to exaggerate details, exaggerate shapes and forms, because when it's this small, it's something that you're not going to notice unless it's BAM in your face. So let's do this hand now. And we're at the right size for the, oh, no, there. We're at the right size of the brush. We just need to switch back to inflate. And we put a knuckle here, one here, one here, and one here. And then we draw on the tendons and smooth out the bases. where they blend into the wrist. And while we're at it, let's go ahead and draw on these tendons too. We're not going to do as much detail on the inner hand. Now, while I'm thinking about it, something else we need to do because of the way this is, we're going to cheat inside the hand a bit. We're going to close it completely, even though it didn't close completely in the geometry, because this makes things easier both on the printing and on the painting. With the printing and the painting and the stuff and the do's-its and the what's-its and the we close off the ends of the hand. Okay, now let's shrink that back down to size. And let's see. And there we go. And knuckle here, knuckle there, and knuckle there. Again, it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be exactly like how hands are. It's going to be close enough to get the feeling across, and especially with these knobblier knuckles, to really get the more bestial aspect across. I do something very similar with my orcs. And just a little bit over these, just to smooth them just a little bit. And now make this bigger, and we add in the thumb joints, as well as the meat of the thumb meeting the meat of the palm. And then around here. Now we move it up a little bit and we get the slash tool. Shrink it back down to the size of the fingers, and again, redraw the space between the fingers. We want to err on making the middle finger thicker and the little finger thinner. Okay, now we frame out, and we've got most of the basic form language done. Still got to do some with the ears, and then it'll be detailing time. Yay, it's already 9:30. I've been on for an hour and a half. So we're going to go back to inflate. The reason we're using inflate, we're going to make sure we have back face mask back on, is because we want to add thickness and depth without totally blowing it out. Okay, that should be good enough. Okay, now, one thing we're going to do, like I said before, we're going to add like little splotches. We're going to use the planar brush, a layer brush, much higher intensity than we were before. And let's make them a little bit bigger. We want these to basically be scutes. If you don't know what a scute is, it's the larger, harder scales on a crocodile or alligator. But where a crocodile and an alligator have relatively even scutes, these will be kind of raggedy and scabrous. Not to mention a little bit more random. And it's only going to be across the shoulders and back. And this is just going to be drawing them on. We're going to detail them a bit more in a second. Okay. Now we're going to go in and we're going to add a little pimple. I hate to use that word, but that's pretty much what it is. On top using the inflate brush. Add them to all except the smallest ones. Okay. Then we're going to go ahead and make the mouse a bit bigger and do it again on the really big ones. If not the big ones, then the ones that are in strategically important locations, ones that look like they really need to have this. Yeah. Okay. Oh! I did notice that the feet are not quite flat anymore. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to use the move brush and kind of pull them back flat to each other. Okay, now let's frame back out. Oh, a little bit more sody. Now, while I'm thinking about it, we need to go in here, hide the tusks, shrink the mouse down quite a bit, and with the inflate brush we need to make that inner mouth close up a bit. So the reason for this is because it'd otherwise be almost impossible to print inside that mouth. This will get further cleaned up when it comes time to fuse everything together with itself. Now we're going to turn the teeth back on, and we're going to add in a couple more, oh, too big, a couple more teethies. We're going to grab them with the move topological and drag them up. Okay, now next thing to do is we need to add a little bit more detail to the face using the slash brush initially. So for example, adding to the laugh lines. And then we're going to hit some of the areas with the smooth brush just to kind of blend them in. Like we're gonna exaggerate the edge of the jaw here. But we're gonna give it just a little bit down these facial wrinkles here. And then let's divide that forehead wrinkle a bit, and then give it some as well as, while we're here, we're going to exaggerate the line around the eye. A little bit of relaxation on the eye itself. And this is because when it comes time, we're going to need to use Dynamesh to blend everything back together. Okay. That should be pretty much it. Now, about the only thing left to do is the lower lip. We need to go ahead and slash under it a bit. We need to make it bigger. And smooth it just a bit. And then we get our inflate brush and we inflate the lower lip. Make it a little bit more exaggerated. That base version I didn't really have a huge lip. Okay, now I'm pretty much done with the tablet now. So we're going to go ahead. Next thing we got to do is load in one more subtool, and that's going to be a base. You know, something to put directly underneath our figure. And yes, that's a nice large base for a nice large figure, but it's not placed right. So the first thing we got to do, we're not going to dynamesh this. It's already got good geometry. We're going to subdivide it a couple times. Delete lower, and we're going to deformation, because as we saw when I made the loincloth, you can move things using deformation. In this case, we're offsetting by the Y. And let's and that is that's looking pretty good. It's already in a good position in terms of XYZ. So the next thing we do is we go ahead and we merge all our subtools. So merge down, down, down. We frame. And we're going to do one level of subdivision to make those lips a little bit smoother. Delete lower. Now that we've done that, we got a couple things to clean up. Nothing major. One of them is the inside of the mouth. Oh wait, no, we do that after the Dynamesh. So, Dynamesh 768, and bing. Okay, so we go in, we're just going to smooth this just a little bit, just to clean up these lines. And when we frame out, that is our troll. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to decimate this model. Now, it's a much larger model than a typical player character. So instead of 70,000 polygons, we're going to go for 140,000. Or 150, really. So I hit Decimation Master, and I hit 75K. And now, it's there, analyzing mesh. And it's doing the processing, and it's calculating, and you can see the orange line that's showing this calculation here in just a second. Yep. And guess what? It's reordering. Writing file to disk, computing, Reading goes Z file, and it's 75,000 vertexes exactly, and 150,029 triangles. So it might be a little bit too high res for some people, but this way, someone doing it in a resin printer will get a nice. Oh, looky here! There's a divot right here. Let's go ahead and clear that up. Okay, now we frame back out, and we have our troll. So let's go ahead and export this troll. And it's going into our broadcast miniatures new Bashy troll figure. Save. And yes, that does mean that later tonight the Bashy troll will be up on Thingiverse for you to download. Now, just out of curiosity, I'm going to go ahead and open Craftware, just so I can see how tall he is, from the bottom of the base to the top of the fist. Okay. Remove. Add. Desktop. 3D printing home. Broadcast miniatures. And Bashy troll figure. He is 68 millimeters to the top of his fist and probably close to about 50 to the top of his head. I'll have a nice render with him compared to a human figure here in just a little bit. Actually, let's do this an easier way. Let's see, is it reading? No, it's not reading that. Okay. Ah well. Either way, we got ourselves a nice Bashy troll. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and, like I said, I'm going to render a picture of it, probably about ready to bash somebody. Then I'm going to convert it to an STL file, because right now it's an OBJ format, which is one of the other most widely used formats. Once I have the OBJ and the STL and the pictures rendered, I'm going to be putting it up on Thingiverse. Now, it is very nearly 10 o'clock tonight. That is almost exactly 2 hours that I have been broadcasting. Yes, 2 hours for one miniature from start to finish. This is how much time having a versatile base geometry can save you. Now, a couple months ago I did the blend shape, which is the morph for the base geometry for the troll. This is the first time I've actually sculpted a troll miniature. So here's hoping people like him. Anyway, I would like to thank you both for coming, because really and truly it's only you, Narthor and Crazy J, that actually have said anything. So as far as I know, you're the only two that are here. Now, what's going to happen next is I'm going to hold my hand up here. I'm going to count down to 1. This is because of, the whole lag and processing and all that. I want to make sure that I've said what I need to say before I sit down. When I get to 1, there it goes. That's it. That's all there. That's all she wrote, and yeah. So let's go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. My throat suddenly got very, very dry. I try to keep talking about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, whether it's anatomy, history, cloth folds and draping, just random weirdnesses, like tonight about the scutes. So that is going to be a 5, a 4, a 3. If you're watching this on YouTube later, like and subscribe, the whole 9 yards. And good night. 2, 1. Bye-bye.